Welcome to Camp 17. We are...
My armpits are sweaty.
My armpits are so
really
sweaty. I don't normally sweat my armpits. But really what we want to help you do is manage your safety. When we feel safe, we'll connect with people. My nostrils aren't as big as yours.
Your fight looks different. Your struggle is going to look different. It is not going to look the same as everyone else.
You're my best friend. You're my best friend. I want you to imagine a vicious cycle. A hamster wheel. Or a circle that goes like this, over and over and over. And it's a ride that just goes like this, and this, and this, and this. And you want to get off. This is what we call the cycle at Camp 17. I know this because I lived this. And so if you can imagine in this cycle, 4 spots. We got a top, we got a bottom, we got a side, we got a side. At the top is perfection and expectations. And then we move on over to mistakes, failures, I messed up, I came up short, life did not happen how it was supposed to. And then as we move around this cycle, you move down to the bottom of the circle and you have shame and humiliation. And then out of that shame and humiliation, you move yourself onto the other side of this cycle where you will find your coping mechanisms, you will find addictions, you will find your numbing agents. And for some of you, this might even be things that you feel like you're entitled to. Your I deserves. We live in a culture that is overfed, we are underslept, we are over-medicated, we are in massive amounts of debt, yet we could buy whatever we wanted, and yet we are so unhappy. And we think that we deserve things, but we're not really sure why we even deserve them. We deserve stuff, and we want everything now. We actually want it yesterday. And then we have a lot of stuff. Things, shoes, purses, bags, cars, books, music, specific types of music, specific types of books. Why do you have those things? We want to be right. We want to be right. We want to look perfect. But ultimately, our insistence upon rightness and perfection are merely there for us to be able to feel like we're safe, to feel like we have value. Just ponder that for a minute. Why do you want to be right? Why do you need to have the facade of perfection? Why can you not fall apart? Why can your life not look messy? Why can things not turn out the way that you want them to turn out, or that you think that they should turn out? Perfection and expectations on yourself, on people, and on life are causing some really, really massive problems in your life. Perfection is a state that is subject to you, the perfectionist. You ever called yourself a perfectionist before? I used to all the time. But my idea of perfection and your idea of perfection are 2 completely different things. We could both have the same task and we would think that our way was the right way. Because then we get to be right. And when we're right, we feel valuable. And when we're right, we feel safe. Because when we feel like we're wrong, we feel devalued, we don't feel smart, we don't feel safe. Perfection is a state that is not even real. Perfection is not real, it's not attainable, it's actually totally imaginary. You are shooting on a target that doesn't even have a bullseye, yet you are allowing it to run your life. You want people to do very specific things for you the way that you want them done. You want to be loved in a certain way. You think that people should do things a certain way. People shouldn't hurt you. People shouldn't die. People shouldn't get in car accidents. Things shouldn't happen in ways that were not the ways in which you wanted them to happen. But they do, because it's life. No great story was ever without a plot twist. And then something else happened. Innovation, creativity, the car, the iPhone, technology, it is all advanced because we didn't get everything right. So how about you take the pressure off you and you allow yourself and those around you to make mistakes? Be okay with making a mistake. Be okay with messing up. You're not wrong. You might have done something wrong, but you're not wrong. If you don't have it all together, there's nothing wrong with you. You're a human being. It's part of being inside of the human race is that we make mistakes. But we've attached mistakes and wrongs culturally to our value. Right? We get big red check marks on our papers and then a big C-, and we don't want to be that kid, so we just try to do everything right from there on out because we don't want to be that kid that's seen as the kid that didn't pass the tests. Or your parents wanted you to have everything all together all the time so that it looked good for them. Do you want your kids to have it together all the time? Actually, you do, because you want yourself to look good because you don't want them to reflect on you. But that's not life. That's not how we learn. You make mistakes and you learn from them. You fall down and you get back up. But what happens in our culture is that we make a mistake or we're wrong. Do you ever realize that you're actually emotionally attached when you realize you're wrong, not when you're just wrong? Because when you're wrong, you don't know you're wrong until you realize that you're wrong. And then when you're wrong or you realize that you make a mistake, a lot of us run to a place of shame. We run, we hide, we feel bad about what we did, bad about what we said. Some of you were humiliated. Some of you want to look perfect because you were humiliated, and so you actually perform out of the fear of humiliation. You behave so you won't be humiliated. You behave so that you feel like you have value. You get the right answer because it establishes value and safety in your life. And if you don't feel safe, the world tends to fall apart. When we don't feel safe, we feel stressed. When we feel safe, we're not as stressed. And so we have to establish the idea that I'm not perfect, neither are you. Life is not gonna happen the way that I want it to happen, and that is absolutely okay. Because like I said earlier, who doesn't want a plot twist in a story? Your story matters. Your mistakes, they matter. But it's how you deal with your mistakes, how you deal with the ways in which you failed. It's how you deal with those things that are affecting your life. We can know that. I can say, man, I totally blew up in a conversation today, and either I can admit that I did that, or I can blame somebody else. I can admit that, man, I was actually really hurting, but I didn't know how to say that I was hurting, so I just got mad. Somebody really, really close to me just left. And food has always been my best friend. So you go and you eat. When we don't want to feel really what's going on inside of us, and we don't want to acknowledge that we don't feel valuable, that we don't feel safe, that we feel imperfect, that we feel fragile, that we feel sad, that we feel afraid, that we feel vulnerable, that we feel rejected, that we feel violated, that we feel less than, when we can't actually engage in feeling those things, we will do whatever we can to not feel them. So we run to alcohol, we run to drugs, to pornography, to relationships, to shopping, to Netflix binges, to social media, to selfies. We run to sugar. We're codependent. We're angry. We isolate ourselves. We go and we sleep. We run to self-pity. We feel bad about ourselves. We over-exercise. We get super busy. Got a lot of stuff to do. But really what we're doing is not wanting to feel our own frailty. And your frailty is beautiful. I don't know anyone that's ever sat in front of another human being who was broken and frail, saying, man, I totally made a mistake. And there wasn't some sort of connection there. And so we have to be okay with our mistakes. We have to know that life is going to throw us curveballs. If you have this idea of the way that your life is going to turn out, I'm telling you, you're going to be so disappointed. Because it's not going to turn out exactly the way that you want it to, because it's life, and because people will let you down, and people will hurt you, and you'll make mistakes, and other people will make mistakes, and somebody will die, and somebody might leave you. But we have to see that our idea of what the world should look like isn't necessarily the way that everybody else thinks that the world should look like. And that's okay. That's what makes this great, right? My idea of doing something and your idea of doing something is totally different, and we can still get to the same place. And your idea and my idea, they can totally conflict, but they can make us better. They can make each other, we can make each other better in the midst of that. But we have to be able to engage in differentiating conversations and say, like, well, I don't think that and I don't think that, but then still be able to connect with people. But we have to know that we're not perfect, and that's totally okay. If you make a mistake, you don't have to blame other people. The perfectionist actually struggles with really, really low self-esteem, but functions in a very high level of blame. That's kind of gross, right? And so I want to ask you, what do you do when you make a mistake? What do you do when you don't feel like you're enough? What happens when there's a plot twist in your life and things don't happen the way that you want them to? Can you see it as, and then something else happened? Or does it cripple you and you run to food? Or you run to buying more pairs of shoes? What happens? Finding ourselves inside of this cycle is so important and so foundational to everything that Camp 17 is. And balance and self-control, humility, knowing who I am and being okay with who everybody else is, and excellence are the ways in which we find ourselves out of this cycle. Excellence and perfection cannot coexist with one another. Excellence is the best I have today in this moment. The best of what you have in your workout on no sleep and no food the night before is going to look completely different than if you slept all night, you ate like an amazing meal the night before, had a great breakfast, and drank a whole bunch of water. But the best of you is what the world is waiting for. Moment after moment. And we get to choose that. And it's so freeing because we're not perfect and you don't have to be perfect. You are not your mistakes. You made a mistake. You are not wrong. You just maybe see things differently than other people. I was sitting in a Chick-fil-A the other day. Yes, Chick-fil-A, because I have balance in my life. I don't eat perfect all the time, but I have balance. I have self-control. Sometimes I really struggle with self-control, let's be honest. But I have balance, so I'm sitting in a Chick-fil-A, and I looked out the window, and I said to Chantal, I was like, man, there was this big building. And I said, all those windows. And they all had a totally different view. And then I said nothing else after that, and I looked at her face, and she kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and sort of pondering like what was happening. And then yesterday, I was like, oh my gosh. We all have different windows that we're looking through. There are experiences, there are stories, there are struggles, there are failures, there are hurts, there are victories. They are who we are. I see out of a window. And just because what I see doesn't look like yours doesn't mean that what you see is wrong either. That's what makes the world go round. We all have windows, and all of these windows looking at one building, we're all going to see a different part of the building. That person down there might not see the C in the chick where I'm looking at the C and I'm like, there's a C. And if you're like, no, there's not a C, and we just go, whoa, it doesn't get us anywhere. Come over and maybe see through their window. People aren't gonna do what you want them to do all the time, and that's okay. Life isn't going to be everything that you planned it out to be. But you can roll with the punches, and you can say, you know what? What's the best I have today? What is it? How can I best love the people in front of me today? You can fail. And when you fail, you can learn from it. Instead of failing and then leaving yourself in a hole of darkness and shame that disconnects you from people and say, I'm a failure. You're doing a Whole30 and you eat a cookie? I'm a cheater. No, you ate a cookie. That doesn't define you. But we have defined our value, and we have defined ourselves by our wrongness and our rightness, on our perfection, and on everything that we think that it should be, or that should have been done, the way that we think that it should have been done. And let me tell you, it's so tiring. Let's take off our masks. Let's stop pretending that we have it all together. And let's get reacquainted with our faces. Like, what does your nose look like? What do your eyes look like? What does your mouth look like? For some of you, you don't even know because you haven't seen it for years. Because you've put mask on after mask on after mask on after mask on. And so I just want to say that the next 6 weeks might just be a hands-on introduction to yourself.